Hello again. In December 2019, energy leaders of the region came together to discuss insights and action for the renewable energy landscape. We renew the discussion now and what it's been like in the past 2 years, which the world has not experienced before. Where do we go from here? Moderating the session, we have Mr. Reggie Ho, Associate Content Director of South China Morning Post. Reggie is Associate Content Director of Morning Studio, the branded content unit of the South China Morning Post. Formerly a travel editor with his esteemed publication, he found himself in constant conversations about the practical aspects of pursuing low-carbon options, especially from the airline and hospitality industry. In recent years, he has headed a number of content projects about environmental, social, and corporate governance, as well as other sustainability matters. When he was a moderator at SAREF 1.0 in 2019, he deepened his interest in renewable energy and its role in sustainability. He's a firm believer of in every crisis lies opportunity and trusts that the world will come out of the COVID-19 pandemic stronger and better. The stage is yours, Reggie.
Welcome to the Renewable Energy Leaders Forum of the Sustainability and Renewable Energy Forum 2021, also known as SAREF 2.0, hosted by Sarawak Energy. 2 years ago, I attended SAREF 1.0 in Kuching and moderated 2 forums, and I also met a lot of experts and a lot of decision makers in the energy sector. And it was certainly an eye-opening occasion. Now, so much has happened since. And in the 2 years' time, the world has faced numerous challenges, including trade tensions and also supply chain disruptions brought forth by the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, economies around are now braving the new normal. And increasingly, there's a conversation about renewables being looked to as the source to power to the future. And after 2 weeks of intense negotiations in Glasgow, Scotland, the world leaders have finally signed off on a new climate change agreement at COP26, endorsed by nearly 200 countries. And with Alok Sharma, UK president of the conference, declaring, we can now say with credibility that we have kept 1.5 degrees alive. Now, but there are always skeptics. Climate activists remain skeptical about the agreement, and some in the scientific community, including German climatologist Hans Otto Ponja, who is on the UN's Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, saying that we are well on our way to a 2 degrees Celsius rise by 2030. Now, with a worrying number of climate-driven events that are happening with the wildfires, with flooding, with a lot of the natural disasters that are happening around us, increasingly the stakes are getting higher and decision makers are urged to think and act fast to avoid what the climate scientists are calling the irreversible climate breakdown. Now we have the technologies and we have the know-how to make things happen and make the energy transition that's needed to a sustainable future. But how do we get there? So today, I'm honored to be invited to moderate this panel. I'm Reggie Ho, from the Associate Content Director for Morning Studio, the branded content unit of the South China Morning Post in Hong Kong. And joining me with a panel of distinguished leaders in the energy sector, I'm happy to introduce them to you. So first, let me introduce to you at the lower right corner is Datu Haji Sharbini Suhaili, Group CEO of Sarawak Energy, the host organization of today's event. And then going to the upper left is Roger Gill, President of International Hydropower Association. And also going to the lower left is Ivan Tang, Country Chairman of Shell Malaysia. And where are we now? In the center lower row is the Wong Group President and CEO of Sembcorp Industries Singapore. Last but not least is on the upper row center is Ibrahim Ariffin, Director of Strategic Planning, SEDA, which is Sustainable Energy Development Authority in Malaysia. Thank you very much, all gentlemen, for joining me today. Now, I would like to open with a question for Sharbini about the energy transition challenges that we're facing. I know that your company is now marking the 100 years of powering Sarawak. And the state also has launched a very ambitious post-COVID-19 development strategy for 2030. So that obviously would require a lot of good, well thought out energy plans to make it happen. Now, using that as an example, your company powering the state for this many years and looking forward to the next many decades, what are the challenges in balancing the economic growth and also matching it with a good strategy for energy transition?
Thank you, Reggie, for the question. And before that, a warm welcome to all our esteemed panel members. Thank you for joining us today. Yeah? So I think the main challenges for energy transition vary depending on the region and involve political, technological, financial, social, and environmental factors. Yeah. And to realize this transition and create a sustainable energy future for all, it is imperative for all of this to be addressed. And to me, strong political will is central to a successful and inclusive energy transition. Policymakers must commit themselves to setting clear targets, objectives, and strategies that support the energy transition sustainably and benefiting everybody involved, including those who may be disadvantaged by this shift, including hydrocarbon-based players. That's what I believe. And in line in this, Sarawak government has taken a holistic approach to power development, balancing energy security, affordability, and sustainability. As a developing state, affordability is key for our people, but we can pursue this together with security and sustainability because we are blessed with abundant hydropower potential. Whilst our early investment in renewable hydropower was in 1980s, our hydropower development accelerated in the 2010s to support the Sarawak Corridor of Renewable Energy, or SCORE, and power Sarawak's economic growth. And this has yielded many positive outcomes, including increasing our generation capacity from 1,346 megawatt in 2010 to 5,222 in 2020, and basically move us from 92% hydrocarbon in our generation mix over 10 years ago to about 70% renewable hydropower today. It's also providing among the most competitive average electricity tariff in the region at $6 per kilowatt hour. And this has benefited our domestic customers and attracted energy-intensive industries into Sarawak. And moving from 92% hydrocarbon to 75% hydro has decarbonized our power system by more than 70% from 2011 to 2020. Hydropower also advances energy transition in Sarawak by facilitating the exploration of other renewable sources like floating solar and green hydrogen to further diversify our gen mix and energy storage. However, this diversity of green technology poses its own share of issues as well. Each of these technologies has to be developed following the specific needs and requirement of specific sites. As such, to me, utilities and energy developers have to become directly involved in technological development. And the cost of doing so is high, and the return on investment is uncertain. Yeah, and the fact that green technology are new and do not have long and proven track record is also an impediment to securing financing from financial institutions, for example, that may have concerns about their commercial viability. And but of course, today they're also becoming increasingly aware of the importance of sustainability risks and opportunities when making investment. And many of them have started considering ESGs, for example, as crucial aspect of their decision-making process. Yeah. So a number of these factors are very important. And for us in Sarawak Energy, we embed sustainability best practices in our business strategies, project development and operation to minimize any negative impact and maximize positive impact of our business. And our hydropower development is guided by the IHA Sustainability Assessment Protocol and the International Commission on Large Dam, or ICOL standard, and guidelines which ensure that they're built and operated safely, efficiently, and environmentally and socially equitable. And as one of Southeast Asia's leading advocates for responsible hydropower development, we are currently also aligned with San Jose Declaration on Sustainable Hydropower Principle, recently launched at the World Hydropower Congress 2021 in Costa Rica. And lastly, for sustainable hydropower to deliver ongoing benefits to communities and livelihoods and the climate, we are committed to this San Jose principle, that is the only acceptable hydropower is sustainable hydropower, and sustainable hydropower requires stakeholders to work together. And these steps have been fundamental in addressing the many challenges we face in our energy transition journey. So I would stop there for the time being and share it more later. Thanks, Reggie.
Thank you very much, Sharbini. Now, so this is the perfect time to bring in Roger, because Sharbini has just mentioned about the San Jose Declaration on Sustainable Hydropower that was announced on the 24th of September at the end of the World Hydropower Congress. So it's been endorsed by a lineup of government ministers, industry CEOs, and also NGO leaders. So can you tell us more about what it means and why this is a game changer for hydropower and also its role in pushing for energy transition?
Well, Reggie, thank you very much for the question, and thank you to the organisers for inviting me onto this panel. I'd like to really echo Sharbini's points about the importance of political will and sustainability in the way we think about the energy transition going forward. And look, I'd really like to reinforce what a fabulous job the Sarawak Energy team have done. They've been a pioneer in adopting sustainability practices in their hydropower developments. They've been a crucial partner of the International Hydropower Association for many years. And I think they set an example at a regional and country level, an example that we need to replicate and scale up across the world. And so it's a great credit to Sharbini and his team. And it's pretty clear the world's on red alert. The IPCC panel sets out in the starkest possible terms the problem for the planet unless we get on top of climate change. So can I give you a bit of background to why we ended up with this declaration, the San Jose Declaration? No countries come close to achieving 100% renewables without hydropower in the mix. Well, in the world now, hydropower provides about 16% of total global energy generation, which is about 60% of all the renewable electricity produced today. It's one of the cleanest sources of electricity. It's got a very low greenhouse emission intensity compared with other forms of electricity. But we know that going forward, hydropower is not enough. To decarbonise our grids, we've got to shift to renewable sources such as wind and solar. But that shift's going to create its own new challenges. As we rely more and more on these intermittent resources, not enough governments have made provision for backing them up with reliable green energy storage capability. And that's a problem. Now, we know that hydropower is a perfect complement to solar and wind, thanks to its flexibility and its long duration energy storage, days and weeks, longer than batteries, a complement to batteries. You could call hydropower a giant water battery, and it's the only proven low carbon way of storing energy for extended periods. Right now, global hydropower provides something like 1,500 terawatt hours of disposable electricity energy. Now, it sounds like just a big number, but it's actually some 2,200 times more than all the batteries and electric vehicles in the world today in storage terms. We see hydropower's role is going to undergo a significant shift in coming decades. It'll keep on providing low-cost baseload, but it will increasingly be valued for its flexibility and its storage as the enabler for growth in variable renewables. So our world will see variable renewables blossom, underpinned by the capabilities of hydropower. Now, unfortunately, the investment in global hydropower is far short of the 100 billion a year identified by the International Energy Agency as being necessary. 100 billion a year necessary in hydropower, and we're probably doing about half of that. And one reason is because hydropower has the negative perception of its environmental impact on our world. And that's why we launched the San Jose Declaration on Sustainable Hydropower, because we want to reset the perceptions, the policies and practices of the sector going forward. We want to move from 20th century to 21st century hydropower. We had a big discussion, as you said, Reggie, in your introduction, with hundreds of organisations and individuals from the industry, from NGOs, from financial institutions, academia, research organisations, and we came up with this declaration. Now, it's quite a long declaration, but at its heart, it did things like, we will not develop new hydropower in World Heritage Sites. If we're moving anywhere near protected areas, we'll ensure that there's net positive outcomes of any work that we do there. We'll start considering decommissioning reviews if plants no longer provide benefits to society. But underpinningly, IHA represents 1/3 of the world's installed capacity, and IHA members have committed to sustainability by adopting this declaration. Now, what does that mean? It means that if you commit to sustainability, you're prepared to have your projects audited to a new hydropower sustainability standard. Set a new benchmark, globally accepted good practice. And by doing that, you can explain how the project provides benefits, how impacts on the local environment are mitigated. It means that you'll start qualifying for green financing. And once you can get green financing, that means investors can get long-term, secure, sustainable returns from their investment in hydropower, which moves to the point that, as Sharbini said, going forward, the only acceptable hydropower is sustainable hydropower, and you've got to prove it. I was really pleased that Alok Sharma, who we've heard a lot in the press about recently, the COP26 president, said when I handed this declaration to him just 6 weeks or so ago, he said, this declaration is a first vital step in increasing the global deployment of hydropower. It exemplifies the collaborative approach we need to make the clean energy transition a reality. In summary, our industry believes that sustainably developed hydropower is a vital ingredient to help the world get to net zero. A long way of saying why the San Jose Declaration is so important.
Thank you very much, Roger. It was very clearly explaining to us why the declaration is important. And as we are all marching towards the goal, that is, we have deadline in 2030, and then we have another one 2050. So the net zero emissions 2050, that is, of course, from the UN Paris Agreement. Ivan, I want to bring you in. In line with the Paris Agreement, of course, Shell's target is also to become a net zero emissions energy business by 2050. So would you share with us the progress that the company has made on that front, and also putting it in a local context, as we are in Asia and you're the country chairman of Malaysia? Tell us more about how this strategy is going to impact Malaysia.
Thanks, Reggie, for the question, and good day to everybody around the panel. And I'm very, very happy to be here with all of yourselves today. So I'll probably answer this in three parts, right? So I'll talk about Shell and our powering progress strategy. I'll talk a little bit about Malaysia and what scenarios towards a decarbonized world we've worked on together with government. And I'll also share some examples around what Shell in Malaysia has done. So let me start by, just sharing that as an international energy company, it is important for companies like ourselves at Shell to be part of the solution as we tackle the challenges of climate change. So at the start of this year, in February, Shell introduced Powering Progress, which really outlines our strategy to accelerate the transition of our business to become a net zero emissions business. So it talks about how we can continue to generate shareholder value while we navigate purposefully to create more and cleaner energy solutions for everyone. Now, at the heart of this is a target to become a net zero emissions business by 2050 or sooner, in step with achieving the goals of the UN Paris Agreement on climate change. Now, our climate change targets are comprehensive. So we talk about scope 1 and 2, which are emissions from our business. And then we talk about scope 3 as well, which is the emissions from the energy products that we produce as well as sell. Now, if you just focus on our emissions from our own business, what we call scope 1 and scope 2, we have reduced our emissions from 2016 of 83 million tons to today, 69 million tons of CO2 equivalent. And our expectation is that by 2030, we'll halve that to 41 million tons. But that's only 10% of our total emissions, because the 90% of our emissions actually come from the scope 3, which is essentially the products that we actually sell and we actually market. So therefore, it's so important for us to reduce our emissions, to actually work with our customers that actually use our energy. And that's why you see we're starting to transform our businesses now, where we're starting to offer and provide lower carbon solutions like electric charging, hydrogen solutions, renewable power like in solar and wind, biofuels, to actually diversify our product mix and lower our emissions in the scope 3 space. So that's the first point. If I move on to Malaysia, and the second point I want to make, in July 2021 this year, we actually launched the Tree, the Sky and the Sun. And this was actually an initiative that we undertook together with the Malaysian Green Technology and Climate Change Center, whereby we developed what scenario of the world that could look like for Malaysia towards a decarbonized economy. And this was the sky, in that we wanted to reach carbon neutrality using the strengths and the unique advantages of Malaysia, of the tree, and that's obvious, it's the nature, as well as the sun, which is the solar potential that is present in our country. Now, the pathway that we talk about in the tree, the sky and the sun really refers to 5 critical levers that we can actually pull in order to have the greatest influence to ensure that as we grow as a country, we also ensure that we keep our emissions in check. And this is balancing to what Sharbini mentioned around the trilemma of affordability, reliability or security, as well as climate change. Now, we have used that scenario of the tree, the sky and the sun to help ourselves understand in Shell in Malaysia what we can do to help to accelerate these efforts towards an economy that is net zero. So in Malaysia here, our focus first and foremost is about our core businesses and about addressing the emissions in our operational control, what we call scope 1 and scope 2 first. So get our house in order. Now in 2018, we actually partnered with Swift Energy to install Shell's first in Malaysia, first solar powered wellhead platform offshore. This basically was a wellhead platform that's purpose built. It actually focused on becoming very energy efficient first, and then you electrify it so that you can use solar to actually power it. We followed that actually middle of this year in 2021, where we actually took final investment decision on another wellhead platform, this time using a hybrid solar and wind renewable power system. This time, this platform looked at also minimizing its footprint. So those are two examples in the upstream. A third example is in our downstream business. In many of our retail sites and petrol stations in Malaysia now, we've got 150 of them where we've installed rooftop solar. And we intend to drive that up to 300 stations of our total of about 1,000 stations in the country. So those are some examples in Malaysia of how we have taken and wanted to embrace our ambition of driving towards a net zero emissions business. Let me leave it at that, Reggie, and we can come back to that later on in the dialogue.
Thank you very much, Ivan. So at this point, so you're talking about the sky, the trees, and the sun, and of course, there are, every company is looking to sort of put their foot down with a strategy, and of course, making that their yardstick, their goal that they can march towards. And I know that I want to bring in Kim Yin, that I believe that your company, Sembcorp, has a strategy called From Brown to Green. And basically, this is what you're striving to achieve. Now, can you tell us more about that and the drive to grow your company's capacity in renewables? So tell us a little bit about how did it all start? What were the sort of motivations behind it? And also tell us more about, are you trying to set an example? Your company, is it trying to set an example for Asia and other companies in Asia and ASEAN to also adapt this kind of approach to march from brown to green?
Thank you, Reggie. And first of all, I'd like to thank the organizer, Sarawak Energy, for having me, giving me this opportunity to share. And of course, congratulations to Datu Sharbini on the 100 years anniversary. We spoke about COP26, and we spoke about all the nations making commitments towards net zero 2050 to varying degree of commitment. And of course, the companies are also making those commitments, and that includes our customers, right? So Sembcorp, we own and operate 13,000 megawatts of power generation capacity, of which 3,000 is green, right, wind and solar. But the 10,000 is actually brown, which is largely gas and coal. So we are in the middle of this movement towards sustainability, and it is very stark to us operating in both the brown and the green spaces where the direction is heading. Now, 10 years ago, Europe and the US, the more developed Western economies have been moving in that direction. And I think in the last 5 years, that momentum has gained significantly in Asia, right? So Sembcorp operates largely in India, China, Southeast Asia. So this is our major markets that we operate in, and we are observing that this movement is gaining momentum. There are some studies that show that in the next 4 or 5 years, by 2025, some 600,000 megawatts of green wind and solar and hydro investments will be made in this power generation space. So for a company like ourselves, to answer your question, what is driving us? It is quite clear that the opportunity is there. That's number one. The second thing that was touched on by Dr. Sharbini just now also, the capital is also moving in that direction, right? You can see the funds are flowing away from brown business into green businesses, right? So that is a very important perspective for us. From a business perspective, it is good reason, right? It's not just doing good and being socially responsible as a corporate, but it's good business to be transiting from brown to green. So that's the point that I want to emphasize. No, it's not. It's actually good business. So we actually like to think of sustainability being our business. So if we want to make sustainability our business, we we have to transit from brown to green. So I would not call Sembcorp. I think we choose to be a little bit more humble. We cannot call ourselves the example. There are so many companies, great companies, good companies, including Sarawak Energy, that is already quite green, and it's also all transiting from brown to green. But we have this Asia footprint that is of significant size, and that we are having, I think, looking at us as more like a typical company, having invested a lot in the brown side of the equation, moving along with all these countries, moving along with all these companies in this movement that's gaining momentum into more green. So again, 13,000 megawatts, of which 3,000 is green, 10,000 is brown, and we aim to have 10,000 of green by the end of 2025. So that is more than tripling our existing green capacity. So think of us as a company that is in transition. Think of us as a company, Sembcorp as a company that is moving from very heavily brown to aspiring to moving into very much heavily green. So that's sort of the Sembcorp story. And we like to think of ourselves as the Sembcorp story in Asia, right? Because we operate mainly in Southeast Asia, China, India. And we think compare to there are actually many successful examples in Europe and also in the US of companies transiting, and with Asia being on this significant momentum, the growth path that I mentioned just now, we think we can be very well positioned. Now, I want to add another point that Sembcorp, our green portfolio is largely in wind and solar, right? And the point that was made by Datu Sharbini as well as Roger just now, the hydro is actually a major force in the green, in the sustainable power generation. I totally agree with what they've said. And that's the reason why I've been engaging Sarawak Energy a lot, and we are thinking there is significant opportunity for us to work together with hydro being so complementary to wind and solar, right? As a storage, as a means of mitigating the intermittency, be it intraday or even interseasonal intermittency. So hydro is a part that is missing in the Sembcorp portfolio, and I'm hoping that we can learn from Sarawak Energy and we can work together with Sarawak Energy, companies like that has significant hydro capabilities and capacity, that we can actually together advance the sustainability agenda for Asia. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Kim Yin. So as we were talking about the importance of having different renewables coming together to facilitate the energy transition that is needed for the world to be sustainable, this is probably a good time to also bring in Ibrahim to talk about 2 years ago when I was with the SAREF 1.0. At the time, the discussion was when or would big hydro become one of the renewable sources. Now, 2 years later, this year, the federal government of Malaysia has formally recognized big hydropower as renewable. So can you tell us more about the role that got to this point, and what the factors that facilitated the decision to recognize big hydro as renewable this year?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Reggie. And also good day to dear panelists and Sarawak Energy for having us on board today, especially discussing about sustainability and moving forward. Thank you for the questions. So I believe regarding the thing that mentioned by Mr. Reggie, that 2 years back, the large hydro is not recognized as part of the renewable energy resources. But I would say that it goes back way back then when we start exploring the renewable energy in Malaysia back in 2001 with the introduction of this one small renewable energy power programs, or in short we call it STRAPS. And these are the inception of the renewable energy in Malaysia. And during that time, the only resources that being considered as renewable energy is mostly the bioenergy and also the small hydro. And these perceptions continues with the introduction of feed-in tariff in 2011. And yet when we gazetted the Renewable Energy Act, and still we define the renewable energy limited to small hydro only. And as also, if I may quote Mr. Roger's statement earlier, that back then there are a lot of perceptions with regards to the renewable and large hydro in terms of the impacts to the environment and also the social around the area of the hydro developments. But however, I would say that as the year progressed and there are a lot more standards in place, especially with the development of the Hydropower Sustainability Assessment Protocol, for example, and also the requirement by the local authorities for any project of this scale to be complied to the energy environmental impact assessment, social impact assessment. This sentiment has been faded away as the development itself is already incorporate sustainability from the inception of the project itself. So if we're looking at the Hydropower Sustainability Assessment Protocol, the requirement to adhere to this requirement is not only limited during the development phase, and also during the operational throughout the asset life is also considered the sustainability measures. This is one of the things that have moved from the definition to include large hydro in the picture. And also like this is also agreed based on the few series of meetings locally and also at the international platform. For example, like the ASEAN meetings, this potential has also been discussed, especially when we aligning the definition of renewable energy. And if we're looking at for example, like the international definition by ARENA, by International Energy Agency, they do recognize that all forms of energy produced by renewable sources, including hydropower, should be recognized as renewable energy. So in aligning by the definition that globally practiced, that hence we are also like Malaysia also much happily then to consider large hydro as part of the renewable energy in Malaysia. And if I may add a little bit, this is the benefits from recognizing the large hydro as part of renewable energy. First of all, I would say that Malaysia is already like committed to a new target along with the definition of large hydro this year. Malaysia also has announced its new renewable energy target, which is 31% by 2025. And this is a much increase from before this, like we're only looking at 20% by 2025. So by recognizing large hydro as renewable energy, we are able to increase our renewable energy target to 31%. And looking at the hydro based on our internal assessment with the assistance by consultants, that we also identify like this hydro is have a second largest renewable energy potentials in Malaysia after solar definitely. And looking at the potentials that the hydropower can explore, we are able also to commit to even higher targets, which is the 40% by 2035. So I would say that this will be the first benefits by recognizing the large hydro. First of all, we are able to increase our renewable energy commitment. Ultimately, it will also contribute towards the ASEAN commitment and also the global commitments towards the renewable energy. And on the second thing, it also have a enabling new initiative. For example, like in Sarawak also, like recently they have deployed the pilot projects coupling the bakun potentials with the production of green hydrogens. This is also part of the good things by recognizing it, also like enabling us to explore the potential as a green hydrogen producer, in which definitely will unlock more economic potentials, economic benefits to the nations, especially during this post-pandemic. And not just that, but I would say that there are also with regards to the higher penetration of other renewable energy resources. For example, like the solar, the intermittency always become a concern, and having a lot of significant large hydro in place, I would say that there are also this also provide a good area to explore the potentials to develop pump hydro, for example, to mitigate the intermittency from variable renewable energy resources. And aside from that, there's also the potentials of going for floating solar. If we see that the current trends, people are trying to shift away from ground-mounted solar towards floating solar to ensure that the development itself is more sustainable. So I would say that having the huge water bodies by the dam also provide opportunity for other renewable energy growth, including the floating solar. So I would say that this recognition is a good milestone for Malaysia moving forward. Thank you, Mr. Reggie.
Thank you, Ibrahim. So let's open up the discussion. I mean, let's bring in something a bit more topical. Well, we mentioned about, of course, COP26, and of course we know that they came to an agreement, but it wasn't easy. It was the 2 weeks of many headlines of painful discussions, negotiations, arguments, but they finally came to an agreement. But I mean, let's just sort of open the discussion, and maybe I'll bring Sharbini back first to talk about, as you watch the events, one of the most important climate events in the world. What were your takeaways? What did you see would be the challenges that the world still needs to face to overcome to make the path smoother towards energy transition?
Indeed, thanks, Reggie. Yeah, there are a lot of debates and discussions, but I believe in the end, I think COP26 has yielded some positive developments. Yeah, because if you look at including the pledges to end and reverse deforestation, for example, and a deal to cut methane emission levels by 30% by 2030, and new commitments to phase out coal power. And I think we can see that at the end of the conference, all member countries agree to stronger emission targets to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees centigrade, and to revisit and strengthen the emission targets of member countries to align them with the Paris Agreement. So that was very good. And to strengthen the national determined commitment, or NDCs, and long-term strategies to align with the 1.5 degrees centigrade and net zero ambitions. And they as well introduce innovative, robust financial goals and mechanism to developing countries to improve renewable energy penetration and support climate action, adoption, and resilience. But also, if you noted earlier, they are the experts who harbor deep concerns about whether countries and companies can keep the 1.5 degrees Celsius goal alive. Yeah, because this is critical, important temperature threshold refers. Well, there was the 2015 Paris Agreement, isn't it? And you mentioned earlier as well that the German climatologist, Mr. Portner, says that we are well on the way to a 2 degrees rise by 2030. So I believe that the stakes, are getting higher, and decision makers must think and act fast to avoid what scientists are calling this irreversible climate breakdowns. And I mentioned earlier on that the main challenges for energy transition will vary from region to region, and it involves us, putting together all these political, technological, financial, and social and environmental factors. So while there are mixed opinions about this outcome, I truly believe that the global focus and commitment towards keeping global temperatures below 1.5 degrees centigrade, I think, has increased tremendously after the COP26. And to me, the energy industry has to play a bigger role, and there are many things that we can do as a whole. For example, from the supply side, we need to diversify our gen mix. From the operation side, we can decarbonize what we can, and choose low carbon options. And like for us in Sarawak Energy, we can share our renewable energy resources with our neighbors, and so that we can ensure that there is a greater energy transition across the region. And we can work to educate our workforce, stakeholders, and customers on how to improve energy efficiency and reduce our carbon footprint overall. Yeah. So thanks, Reggie.
Thank you, Sharbini. What about other guests? Do you think? What were your takeaways? And as the next one is going to be in Egypt, do you think that will be a smoother, better atmosphere, or do you think that they are always going to have this wrangling going on every time?
I'm happy to have a dig at that. I guess we came away from Glasgow with cautious optimism, but wow, the journey is going to require relentless commitment from governments, and as a result, inspiring organisations I mean, I'm encouraged just listening to Kim Yin's comments, but daunted by the challenge. If you were running a business with 13 gigawatts, 10 of which you've got to roll over in relatively short time, that's an enormous change in our world. And it's one thing to have a talk fest about it. It's another thing completely to do it. Even the concept of hydropower doubling its capacity by 2050. That's just in 30 years' time. Doubling means what we did in the last 100 years, we've got to do in the next 30. To get a scale effect of this and let us get on with it, you have to be a little concerned that we're tinkering around the edges at the moment. So talk is great because it helps us focus, but then we have to turn that into action. And I'm really pleased to hear Ibrahim talking about some of the targets that you're setting there, because targets will help you measure whether you get there. So that's also giving you encouragement. I think the other thing that was good about Glasgow was the discussions of carbon markets, trying to get some rules around carbon markets. We have really had trouble getting a price on carbon. We know that the commercial sector all says, give us a price on this thing, and then we can start valuing it. And once we can value it, we can invest in it. However, we've found governments have found that a very difficult concept to get around because they see it as a sort of impost on the economies of their community. But I don't think they've quite got the understanding that it's actually a lubricant for activity in the private sector to get money going. And I love that concept that Kim Yin described as the money's flowing from the brown to the green. Yes, it is. And that's really encouraging. And I think COP's given us that. But, we're going to be battling this and battling this and battling this. This is, and I'm battling it because I've got 5 little granddaughters, all under the age of 6. And I really, that gives me enormous enthusiasm to get it right.
Now, we can continue, of course, to talk about COP26, but also I want to bring in maybe sort of like some extra elements to talk about. We talked about that we need to be, we need to invest in renewable projects. There's an enormous investment. How is it, what different forces need to come together to really get it going as we are making this sort of challenging transition when the world is still largely quite reliable on oil and gas, the kind of investments that are needed. And also, has COVID-19 pandemic really changed the conversation in some way, maybe a silver lining, sort of making this conversation more vibrant in terms of using renewables to propel us to the new normal? Maybe I'll bring in Ivan first.
Those are some big questions to let me see how I would frame this. So, for a company like Shell, with its traditions originating from the oil and gas side of the business, it's difficult to shake away the societal expectations that we are the problem. And reality of it is that we've got to confront it together. And I'm really proud that Shell is able to step up and say that, look, we want to be part of the solution here too. And I think that's why we've gone out there and said that we are also going to set ourselves up with some really ambitious targets that will start to shift our traditional businesses from where we started off in the oil and gas more and more into lower carbon fuels. But we've got to do this, and I think this is where the conundrum lies, right? We've got to do this at a pace where countries can afford to do this. So, in the traditional developing countries, reality of it is that I think there are more urgent issues that need to be resolved around lifting, its citizens out of poverty, and making sure that there's food on the table to start off with, clean water and the like. And I think there are also countries that have the capacity and the capabilities to move much quicker, and they need to. So let me give you an example here of the work that we are doing in a place like Europe, where we believe that society needs to move quicker there. And what role technology, what role a company like Shell can have there to transform the actual energy landscape. So in Holland today, we have existing, call it traditional refineries, which we are actually transforming to become the energy and chemical parks of the future. So what does that mean in the transformation? So as inputs into this plant or feeds into these plants now, you are using things like renewable energy through wind and solar. You are then also, and that comes from offshore that we have actually installed. We are also looking at green hydrogen, and we've built the largest green hydrogen facility in Rotterdam to enable that. And that is powered by the renewable energy that you generate offshore. Now that forms the feedstock to these plants that then produce the biofuels of the future, and you are able to flex and adapt, whether it be sustainable aviation fuels, biodiesel, and the like. So you can offer products now that are lower carbon, made from lower carbon sources too. Now you have byproducts there. You have CO2 as a byproduct generally. And then you have technology there, like carbon capture and sequestration, that can actually capture that, transport that, and store it safely, so that the totality of the energy system can change. Now that is not a simple transformation that will require private companies to actually invest loads of money to actually ensure that, as Kim Yin mentioned earlier, the sustainability of the businesses is good business, but we've got to be purposeful in how we do this too, and that just transition comes into play. If I take another a smaller example closer to home, in our businesses in Malaysia here, we're starting to also offer EV charging, but not just in the traditional sense of just EV charging, but high performance EV charging, where you can actually charge your car now in a much, much quicker period of time. And that will really encourage, together with stuff the government through policy are doing, to actually incentivize people to buy more electric vehicles and actually change their consumption to lower carbon energy products. And then we would gladly accept the hydroelectricity power that Sharbini and the team would be able to offer for that electric charging that we can actually discharge into the vehicle. So just some examples of what we can do together as a society to actually drive that change. Sorry, Reggie, I don't know whether I answered it, but I hope that I've given you snippets.
It has. You have done very well. And I think this is also a very good way to bring Kim Yin in terms of using technology. I'll pose the question to you first, but of course, all other speakers are welcome to also put the insights forward. I understand that Sembcorp is very big on using technology, like all the different companies, I'm sure also. But in terms of storage, there's something in the technological advances in that can really help us make sort of energy plans more sustainable. Can you share more with us about what you're doing, your company?
Thank you, Reggie. The just a little bit more context that I thought may help. The last 6 to 12 months, we saw the global energy markets go haywire, right? Natural gas prices shot through the roof, coal prices shot through the roof. Part of it was explained as that because in the last number of years, investments have been going into the green part of the equation, a lot of wind and solar investments, and partly also contributed by low oil prices. There hasn't been too much of investments going into the traditional side or the fossil fuel investments. And when encountered then in a year in which there was a rebound in demand from COVID, and at the same time low rainfall in Brazil affecting their hydro, and low wind in Europe affecting their wind, and all of a sudden we have this upheaval that everybody, all the markets in the world, the economies in the world have to suffer from. This volatile and high energy prices. I think about that as a transition pain, right? We've been talking about transition from brown to green. So this is in my mind, to help my simple mind understand what's going on. It's a bit of a transition pain that, if not addressed, in our path towards net zero 2050, we will see many more rounds of such happenings, right? Because the inherent technology, which is wind and solar, other than hydro, of course, it's 24/7, but wind and solar is very, very subject to the elements. Even hydro, right, in Brazil, without proper rainfall or the predictable rainfall, we have shortage. So from that perspective, then technology does provide some solutions, right? So in particular, in form of storage, where there is hydro, it is the cheapest form, as Roger pointed out just now. That's the best, right? But on the one hand, there is a certain lead time to bringing hydro plants online. On the other hand, technology has also bring forth in terms of energy storage. 10 years ago, it was probably, people wouldn't even think about it as being something that is viable. But today, energy storage is very much viable, even big lithium batteries. So Sembcorp operates one of the largest fleets of battery storage systems in the UK, a pretty advanced market with almost half their energy mix being renewables, right? So the intermittency that the UK grid is facing is very much a preview to what many of our grids in Asia will face as we bring in more and more wind and solar capacity, especially. So our battery fleets, it's not very big, it's about 120 megawatts, but it is already one of the largest fleets of batteries operating in the UK. We are learning so much from that market, from operating these batteries, because we were able to come in to help the grid mitigate the intermittency, the intraday, especially intraday volatility coming from the wind and solar renewables into the UK grid. So that in my mind is one important technology advancement that can smoothen out somewhat this transition pain that I spoke about. Another important technology that is out there is actually high voltage direct current transmission, basically long distance transmission, because by connecting regions, we will be better able to match demand and supply. So where if you have a large enough area, you can imagine the rain clouds crossing a certain region. Where it was at A, the rain is coming down, there's no solar, but B has sun. The rain cloud goes to B, A comes back, right? So once you have it interconnected, these regions, then the intermittency can somewhat be mitigated through matching demand and supply, by matching shortages of supply with abundance of supply. So the advancement in transmission technology, long distance, with direct current as well as high voltage, reduces the transmission losses across distances. So I'm holding out these two as major examples of technology. One is storage. As we scale, you become cheaper. And the other one is interconnects. And with these two, I think it could help us smoothen out some of the transition pains that I mentioned just now. And again, just a little bit of advertisement. Sembcorp is in the middle of some of this technology. We operate batteries, and we also are involved in transmission businesses. So I hope that gives people a little bit to think about. So as we transit, maybe in terms of financing, in terms of investments, financiers and investors should also focus on transmission as well as on storage, even as they think about putting money into renewables.
Thank you.
Reggie,
Yes.
if I may share my 2 cents on this.
Yes, of course. I was going to bring in.
I would say that I'm totally agree with Mr. Kim Yin with regards to the technology in terms of how we can leverage better on the renewable energy projects. And if I may add a little bit, for example, like in Malaysia, for example, our electricity system, for example, the grid system, I would say it has been developed since many years. And I would say for example, like for Sarawak Energy, it's already like about 100 years. And I would say at the point of the initial point, it was not developed and designed to cater for renewable energy. Because I would say that all along, mainly we are relying on conventional plants, fossil fuels, because as it is more available, more affordable, for example. And with the recent years, with the higher penetrations from renewables, we can see that the grid has their limitation in terms of accepting more and more renewable energy. And hence, I would say that there will requires a lot of modification, a lot of enhancements, and as many people talking about making the grid smarter. But yet, as much as the words are easy to say, but this kind of development usually requires very high investments, and it goes back to how we want to recover all the investment required for these grid enhancements. If we pass it to the electricity tariff and pass it to all the end users, and it will definitely have some social impacts. Because if we gauge the public perception at the moment, for example, like in Malaysia, it still goes back to the monetary value. Like, do you want the clean energy or you want cheap energy? For example, it goes back to this. So if we see that there are certain uprising in European countries, in Australia, for example, when they are integrating more and more renewable energy, their solar tax, for example, they increase in their electricity tariff, and this cause some commotions within the public. So I would say that this is also one of the area in terms of how we want to engage the public, how we want them to also be part of the journey towards the renewable energy. And I would say that with the leverage on technology, for example, like the solar, as it becomes more and more affordable, the public and even the domestic user can also be part of the game at the moment. So we say that this is quite a good thing in terms of how we want to get the public also on board in ensuring that we are able to address the climate change.
Okay, can I add Reggie on the?
Sure. Yes.
Yeah.
So Roger.
So I think.
No, Roger. Is it Roger? Yeah.
I think Roger can go first.
Sharbini. No.
You go first, Sharbini.
Oh, okay. Sharbini, and then I'll bring in Roger.
No, just I think on technology, on energy storage, battery storage is something that we are looking at as well. But the other thing that Sarawak Energy is quite keen on is to explore green hydrogen, and converting our excess clean hydropower into hydrogen storage. And basically, if we can, I know the cost is quite high at the moment, but if we can scale it up and basically establish a hydrogen economy in Malaysia and across the region, and as well, export to Japan and Korea and whatnot, I think we have a good chance to really drive the cost down, so that it's close to parity with conventional way of, for example, transportation system, for example. Yeah. So those are the things that to me that we need to look at. And the other part of energy storage is, to me, we are now working on floating solar at our hydro dam, and solar and hydro, I think, is a very good combination because they complement each other. And during the daytime, we can keep the water behind the dam, and basically, just use solar power. And during the evening, then we can let the water through the turbines. And so basically, to me, hydro is a natural battery, and to combine with floating solar, I think it's something that we in Sarawak Energy is very keen to work on. And our aspiration is to help to have 5% solar by 2030 in our gen mix. Yeah? And I think we can do that because we have big areas of water bodies, around our hydro dams. Yeah. Roger?
Just very quickly, I think, Reggie, what you've heard from this group is that technology is not the problem. 20 years ago, if you'd posed the same question, I'd have said to you, technology is a problem. We don't have the quantity of it. We don't know how to pull it together. The problem today is that we don't have the planners aren't being able to lay the path out and make the moves to get the grid in the right place, to get the incentives in place. The markets are still scratchy. They don't provide the sort of incentive for investing in pumped hydro. They're simply not markets across the world. It's a great idea, but there are not bankable arrangements in the markets that reward in a long scale the investment to get credit to do these things. So they're the impediments, not the technology. And I think, as Ivan started to say, once you see the momentum rolling, communities will get behind it because they can see we're making progress. At the moment, we're still having talk fests, and that's challenging to us. Not the technology, it's really our ability to motivate ourselves to get it done.
So with that, we have about 10 minutes left. Maybe we should close with some concluding thoughts. You know, technology is not the problem, but I think that a lot of different pieces need to come into place. You know, policies, of course, awareness, making renewables not just good for the environment, but it's also the future. It's good investment. It has good ROIs. How about if I want to maybe bring Kim Yin back? Maybe do you have some sort of concluding thoughts about where do we go from here? We have 2030, we have 2050, and there's still so much to do. What do you see in your capacity in the next 10 years? How do you want to do your part, and how do you think that other pieces need to come together to achieve that?
Thanks, Reggie. If I have a parting words, 2 points. One is stay optimistic, right? There will always be, we live in a global village, and there will always be differences in opinion. But you can see the direction of the opinion moving in an irreversible and gaining momentum, right? So, and like Roger pointed out, 20 years ago, 10 years ago, people still arguing about climate change, right? That's no longer the argument. Now people are COP26, people are focusing on what is your commitment? What are you going to do about it, right? How do you measure it? Are you going to live up to it? That type of, and of course, there's a developing versus developed market. But let's stay optimistic. It is moving in the right direction. And if each one of us put in our own effort, do what we can, stay optimistic. So that's the first message. Second message that I like to emphasize is let's collaborate, right? None of us have everything that is necessary to make it work. But if we collaborate, problems can be resolved, right? Interregional, right? The load centers probably do not have enough access to green energy, but not too far away. In some cases, very far away, there will be large tracts of desert where you could have solar energy built up, right? Let's say on a good day, I can imagine Middle East or Australia becoming a big producer. Or for that matter, Sarawak or Kalimantan becoming a big producer of hydrogen because you have the resource. And once you are able to bottle it, you can ship it to the load centers in North Asia, right? And perhaps through also interregional high voltage transmission lines. So by collaborating and cutting across national or geographic boundaries, we can move towards green in a much more emphatic manner. So the two messages I have, one, stay optimistic. The other one is collaborate. So thank you.
Now, so Kim Yin just brought in about sort of, of course, different economies, Asia versus the developed and developing worlds. But in Malaysia, of course, Malaysia being in Asia, but it's a very strong economy, it's rising really fast, has really a lot of ambitions, towards becoming, one of the economic powerhouses. So Ibrahim, can you tell me maybe from policy side, what do you think would be in the next 10 years? What should countries do, governments do? What would be the the vision and drive that they need to make everybody work together, and maybe regionally, internationally.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Reggie. So I would say that then again, I would say that the climate change is a national agenda. I would say that it was not right to like really pinpoint to just one party to address this climate change commitments, because as much as possible, like with the shift towards this energy transition phase, as much as it offers a lot of interesting areas to explore, to work together, to collaborate, but I would say it was not really a walk in the park. There has its challenges, there has its obstacles, there has its barriers. So I would say that first of all, like as climate change is a national agenda, I would say that everyone need to join hands and make things happen. So in particular, that there are a lot of new technologies, for example, but regardless, they need to compete with other technologies that is more competitive in pricing, for example, and this always remain a challenge. Like from myself, also like I can say that we also like receive a weekly basis on new proposals. Indeed, it's a good proposals, but they don't have the platform to explore and moving forward in terms of how they want to move forward with the new technology. Like for example, like in Malaysia, for example, I would say that the wind technology is on the lower side based on some assessment conducted a few years back. I would say that Malaysia has a low wind speed and thus it stops there. But why not we have a more progressive approach in terms of how best we can leverage on the technology by providing some sort of test bedding frameworks in terms of how they want to make it commercial in the Malaysia context. Because I would say that renewable energy, aside from it's able to provide energy security, able to harness our own indigenous resources, it also provide a lot of opportunities in terms of employment opportunities, exploration opportunities, and ultimately it also unlock a lot of economic benefits. And in recent years, I would say that there are a lot more tractions with regards to the renewable energy interests. For example, like recently this year, we also like launched the net energy metering 3.0. This is one of the rooftop solar promoting mechanisms. And within just about few months, all the quota is almost taken up. And compared to previous year, like when we launch the net energy metering back in 2017, it takes almost about 3 years to finish up a 500 megawatt quota. But this year, when we launched the NEM 3.0, within months, the quota is already like finished up. So we can see that there are a lot more interest in terms of renewable energy. And the next question, how we want to make it more commercially available in terms of enabling private sectors to meet their sustainable goals. So I would say that this involves a lot of policies, a lot of cost sharings, and definitely cross-sectoral initiative. Ultimately, for example, with the technology such as the hydrogen, we might become the producers, but as much as possible, we also need to create our own local demands. And when we're talking about local demand, it's just not about electricity generations. It also involves other ministries such as the transportations, industrial process. And by having this local demand, it can make the production cost have a more business values, and we are able to have a more sustainable directions. Sorry, Mr. Reggie, you are muted.
So Ivan, a closing thought for representing a global corporation in Malaysia, being a chairman. So what do you see in the next 10 years, or the goals that we are setting for ourselves?
No, thanks for the question. Yeah, I mean, this is, what the pandemic has taught us is that global problems are going to need significant collaboration to resolve. And I completely agree. I think, Roger, you said it too, Sharbini, Kimin, and Ibrahim. It really is about collaboration and all of society approach to things. Ibrahim, I think was your point earlier around, I think you made the mention that, upgrades to our grid system is going to require investment. And, private companies like ourselves require the stability of the investment climate and long-term policies that really enable that type of long-term returns, that type of long-term partnership that is required to actually transform our energy system. And I think as such, policy is such a pivotal part of that because it can provide that stability and predictability for investments. it is by aligning the interests on the supply and the demand side that we can really transform the energy systems of the future, right? So I think, that's a critical part of it. And I think the second part of it really is about continuous, open and transparent public engagement. Because I think the reality is that, if this was a simple solution, we would have an answer already. But, countries move at different paces, acceptance, depending on where you are in the spectrum of the value chain is different, right? So we are going to need to continue to ensure that we hear each other out in forums like this. I've learned a tremendous amount just by having this conversation here. I remember San Jose and the sustainable hydropower that has been signed, right? I mean, those are the things that we need to help each other learn and share so that we can actually together collaborate towards that energy transition. So those are some of my sort of thoughts to close, Reggie. Thank you.
Thank you, Ivan. May I finally bring in Sharbini again? I know that the ambition is that we have the ASEAN energy grid. So Kim Yin just talked about, the needs for cross-border collaborations, sharing the grids, sharing energy resources. As a closing thought, what do you see in the next 10 years, and how do you envision Sarah Energy to play a part in this?
Yeah, thank you. So I like the word collaboration, and I would like to add interconnectivity to that as well. So I believe that the way forward for all of us across the different business sectors and different states and countries, I think is to align ourselves and advocate for this net zero by 2050 and the global temperature targets that we have agreed on COP21 and 26. I think we must be willing to share resources, knowledge and experience to advance this sustainability agenda, and as well to ensure that our present and future generation will thrive. For us in Sarawak, of course, we have our renewable hydropower, and as we get towards the 1.5 degrees Celsius, and a business model that supports sustainability, and we have always focused on leveraging this benefit of this hydropower to deliver this sustainable future and power the social economic growth for Sarawak and also the region by providing reliable, renewable and affordable energy for Sarawak and for the region. And as I said earlier, we will continue to maintain a high share of renewable energy in our gen mix with at least over 60% renewable hydropower and 5% solar or biomass by 2030. And we will continue to pursue energy solutions that balance security of supply with sustainability and driving energy transition across ASEAN by sharing our renewable energy with neighbors through regional interconnectivity. And I believe that such international collaboration also plays a central role in accelerating the growth of variable renewable energy around the world, and especially if we can share our reliable hydropower that can, complement the intermittent power like solar and wind in our neighboring states. And basically, I think the development of common standards and pathways to facilitate this transition. So I believe we can all agree, and we need to act fast, and we need to act now. And we must act in concert with each other in unified in our commitment. And so regardless of which country we are in or which sector we are in, we all have a role to play. So I think thank you, Reggie.
Well, with that, I think Roger, do you have we started the closing thoughts after you brought in the idea about technology is not enough, but anything else that you would like to add?
Oh, look, I really enjoyed listening to Sharbini because I'm very hopeful about the future. We just have to make net zero happen. And I'm probably one of the most privileged people of any industry leader in that I've got Sharbini's sitting next to me, cloned all over the world, just waiting to get sustainable hydropower in there backing up wind and solar. I, like Ivan, have been encouraged by hearing about the more challenging sectors to abate. I think his problem is much greater than ours. We have the tools, we're ready to go, and I look forward to watching Malaysia in particular unfold its pathway towards sustainability survival.
And with that, I would like to thank everybody. Datu, Haji, Sharbini, Suhaili, Group CEO of Sarawak Energy, host organization of today's event. Thank you, Roger Gill, President of International Hydropower Association, Ivan Tang, Country Chairman Shell Malaysia, and Wong Kim Yin, Group President and CEO of Sembcorp Industries Singapore, and also Ibrahim Ariffin, Director of Strategic Planning, SEDA, Malaysia, which is Sustainable Energy Development Authority. And with that, I'm Reggie Ho from Morning Studio, Brand Accounting Unit of the South China Morning Post. Thank you very much for joining me, and thank you very much for watching. Have a good day.